sermon title today is The Value of One Human Life. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of introduction to the story that we heard right before Emerald read. I'm going to just kind of give you a little bit of background. Abram was 99 years old when God appeared to him again and said, "I am God all-powerful. If you obey me and always do what is right, I will keep my solemn promise to you and give you more descendants than can be counted." Now Abram bowed with his face to the ground, at which point God said, "I promise you will be the father of many nations. That's why I now change your name from Abram to Abraham. I will always keep the promises I have made to you and your descendants, because I am your God and their God. And Abraham, you and all future members of your family must promise to obey me if you want these things to come true." So one hot summer afternoon, Abraham was sitting by the entrance to his tent, probably relaxing, when God appears to him. And Abraham looked up and he sees three men standing nearby. And Abraham quickly runs up to the men, greets them, bowed to them, and said, "Please come to my house where I can serve you. I'll have some water brought to you so you can wash your feet, and then you can rest under the tree. Let me get you some food to give you strength before you depart. I would be honored to serve you." "Thank you so very much," the stranger said. "We accept your offer." So, of course, Abraham, who didn't cook, had Sarah prepare a meal for the strangers. Hopefully he brought the water. During the meal, one of the angels told Abraham and Sarah that he would return this time next year, and at that time, Sarah would have a son. As the three men got ready to leave, they looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham was walking part of the way with them. God said then to God's self, "I should tell Abraham what I'm going to do, since his family will become a great and powerful nation and be a blessing for all the other nations on earth. I have chosen him to teach his family to obey me forever and to do what is right and fair. Then I will give Abraham many descendants, just as I promised." So it is then that our story begins with Abraham bargaining with God to show mercy to the people of Sodom. And I love the way Abraham is bargaining with God. God, if there's 50 righteous people, if there's 40, so on. We love to bargain with God. How many people have bargained with God? "God, if you grant me this, if you give this to me, I promise I won't ever do this and this again." So before we all jump to conclusions, I want to clear up a few points. Why God wanted to destroy the city, as reported in the Hebrew text, has to do with several specific events. Prevalent among them was cruelty to beggars and visitors. They would often be met with murder and greed by the residents of Sodom. The other reason the Hebrew text tells that Sodom was eventually destroyed was because of homosexual rape, and I underline rape, R-A-P-E. Now, mind you, homosexual acts are very different from homosexual rape. This is what happened shortly after the story of Abraham and God, talking about how many people to save. Back in the day, when people, our countries haven't learned anything. We still love to fight each other over territory, over whatever. When two parties would be fighting each other during war, the one that won would conquer the ones that were defeated by doing homosexual rape on them. And that's what God was referring to. So God goes and sends two people out to check Sodom out and see if the rumors are true. And there they are welcomed by Lot. Now some men of Sodom that night surrounded the house and demanded that the angels be given over to them so that they could be intimate with them. Now that's not about homosexuality, it's about raping a stranger. We are, I hope, all aware in this day and age that rape has nothing to do with sex and everything to do with power and a violent crime. Amen. Lot refuses, and the rest, as they say, is history. It isn't the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah that interest me, though, because we've heard this a lot. We teach it in the Bible in homosexuality class. But rather, it was the character of Abraham, and ultimately the character of God. Abraham wants to know, will God kill off the righteous among the wicked? Will he kill off the innocent along with the guilty if he takes out the whole city? God, this one enormous creative force who created our earth and our sky, I believe cares about each one of us. So if there's 50, then I won't take the city. Okay, if there's 40, 30, 20, 10. We see that God cares about people individually as God creates, removing and creating the skies and the earth until finally creating the first man and the first woman, Adam and Eve, or Adam and Steve, or Eve and Ava, if you like. And the story continues to focus downward from the universe to the earth to humankind, to specific lands and peoples, as we see the stories of humans that struggled with God, with living out God's will. But here in this Genesis story, we have Abraham, who reminds God that the story of salvation is the story of every single human being. Abraham persuades God to stay God's hand on behalf of the few, the very few probably, who are still righteous and holy. God was ready to be just, to punish the wicked, but Abraham reminds God to be merciful. Now, I kind of have this theory, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I kind of have a feeling that as we evolved, as humanity evolved, that God evolved with us in our relationship with God. I truly believe that. If you read from the Old Testament to the New, you kind of see God kind of softens up a bit, I think. I don't know, but that's one of the questions I want to ask. That God and Abraham should care about a single human life means that a single human life is more important than any group or any nation. We're talking about individual lives. As I was reading the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, I couldn't help but think of when we dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima, which was August 6, 1945. Perhaps because we lived near Los Alamos and New Mexico was a testing ground, that came to me this time when it hasn't in previous years when I preached on this text. I lived elsewhere. I think of Hiroshima not because the people in Hiroshima were evil or even deserving of what happened to them, far from it, but because it was a city that was destroyed on one single day by one single act. I don't believe it was the hand of God that turned the city of Hiroshima to rubble. It was our hands, the hands of human beings. And I am sure that many of you remember this, but those of you who were not alive during the 1940s may not know just how much Americans characterized the Japanese as our enemy. So much that I know those that lived in California and all were put in camps who were in America. Now, I was not alive in the 40s, but I learned about World War II and have heard stories which tell of the suffering of many, many people, of families being torn apart. America was even attacked at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii by the Japanese, and the destruction was unbearable. So when we look back on history, we have to ask ourselves, what happened to us as a nation on August 6th when we dropped the first bomb in Hiroshima? How does it relate to the idea that God cares for each individual human life? There are two museums dedicated to the events of August 6th. The museum in Los Alamos, has anybody ever seen that? Is dedicated to the technological models of the two bombs that fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and shows photos of the labs. It's a very distant and detached view, a view from above the bomb. Now the Museum of Hiroshima is another matter. If you go there to Japan and visit, you will find among the photos of the destruction the stories of those who managed to survive. And here you'll hear about each individual, particular human being that survived that horrible day. I'm going to tell you briefly about one woman named Shin Bok-soo, a Korean who was married to a Japanese man. She was only 28 at the time. She said that first there was a flash, and then an ear-splitting roar. Instantly, everything became dark, and she could see nothing. She could hear voices crying out, "Help me! Help me!" Terrified, she stood up on her shaky legs into the pitch black. It grew a bit lighter. Where had her house gone? The neighbors' houses, too, were smashed. And everywhere she looked was just a pile of rubble. She began to look for her children, screaming their names, digging in the rubble. As rain as black as oil fell from the sky. Can you imagine that? Rain as black as oil falling from our sky. She gave us a view from below the bomb. What happened? Now, we've been told a great many things about why America dropped the bomb. Foremost was to end the war, which was the right thing to do, to end the war, to save American lives. This is true. It did end the war, and it did save American lives. And we know the Japanese were a formidable enemy at the time. Many of you may know some other facts about that time in 1945. That the Soviet Union was preparing to invade Japan on August the 14th from the north. That too would have taken much less of a cost to Japan if the Russians had invaded. We also knew that Japan at the time was exploring conditional surrender, even as our target team was exploring a list of cities on which to drop the first atom bomb. They wanted to find a city that had not been destroyed by firebombing, so they could see just how well the atomic bomb worked. 150 scientists who worked on the Manhattan Project, which is the ones that created the bomb, and there was a series about it recently, signed petitions to our president to try to stop him from dropping a bomb on Japan. I believe they were present-day Abrahams, arguing against the use of a weapon which they called a means for the ruthless annihilation of cities. They went on to say in another petition, our use of atomic bombs in this war would carry the world a long way further on the path of ruthlessness. That really resonated with me. Certainly the leaders of Germany during World War II were ruthless. They convinced their country that the Jewish people and other minority groups needed to be wiped off the face of the earth. We mourn the loss of 6 million Jewish people who perished through the violent and ruthless orders of Hitler. I read stories of when Germany was liberated. Many of the German people were forced to view the concentration camps and the horrible conditions that the Jewish people and other minority groups had lived and died in. Many of them did not know or were not aware of the atrocities that were taking place, but others did. Many people were put on trial for war crimes and held accountable for their actions. Several days after the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, reporters asked Gandhi for his reaction, and he replied, "The atom bomb resulted for a time being in destroying the soul. What has happened to the soul of the destroying nation is yet too early to see." I have been thinking a lot about what is happening to us as a nation, as we seem to become more divided and more polarized. This group, this group here. What is happening to the soul of our great nation that we live in? And I love this country. Please don't hear me as being anti-American. I love my country, and I think we're very blessed to live here.
Amen.
As I go back and look at our history, though, and what happened to us as a nation on August 6, 1945, how did Hiroshima erode our sense of morality when we permit ourselves as a nation to do something like that? How did it affect our fragile sense of what is permissible for one human being to do to another? Did the use of a weapon designed to ruthlessly annihilate whole cities contribute to where we find ourselves today? What is the line of connection from Hiroshima to Vietnam, from Hiroshima to Iraq, and on to Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib? The value of one single particular human life guards against the vilification of a whole nation, a group, a race, or a tribe of people. One single person matters. Every single person matters. I believe it forces each of us to confront the part of us that wants to reduce the value of another in order to destroy them. If we make them Japs, then killing them is not the same as killing a fellow human being. If they come from the Middle East, we assume they are a terrorist. If they are Latino or Latina, Hispanic, we say they are illegal aliens, undocumented residents, and they must go back to Mexico. If they are African American, do we somehow believe that their lives have less value than Americans who come from European descent? I believe that the soul of our great country is very much in jeopardy as we continue to launch wars designed to destroy others while risking comparatively little damage to ourselves. The view from above the bombs. One-sided war is now the norm. We go about our daily lives while somewhere off in the corner, people are bleeding and suffering and dying below the bombs. Now, I know that the pulpit is the place for speaking our truth, but I don't believe it's the place for partisan politics. How to distinguish between the two is always a very sensitive task for the preacher. I am concerned, though, about the events that have become so common on the news. Mass shootings. The desire to take out a distinct group of people. Citizens who are victims of excessive force used by law enforcement. And then the attack on the law enforcement. Picking them off one by one. I'm concerned when I hear the rhetoric that calls out different groups of people and portrays them as less than, as dangerous, evil, and not welcome in our country. Or how one group of people believes that other groups, which are perceived to be different, must change and be like them. Just how far along do we have to travel along this path of ruthlessness before we wake up from our slumber and cry out for justice, love, mercy, grace, to be our guiding principles for our life and for the world in which we live? It starts with one person, then another, and another, and another. It is my belief that one of the most important roles of the 21st century church, that we be the one place that is called to speak the truth and to raise up a prophetic voice of hope and love, which challenges the members of society to embrace diversity, embrace those that are different, and to respond to others from a place of love and not fear. Too much fear is coming out from our political leaders at this time. One of our roles is to hold our political leaders accountable for actions that divide and separate and discriminate against any group of people. We must hold leaders accountable for policies and laws that push us further along on this path of ruthlessness. That's why I'm so opposed to the death penalty. Killing someone does not bring back the people that they harm.
That's right.
And it only creates more violence, I believe. When we encounter racism and sexism, classism, and all the other isms, we must ask ourselves how it relates to the idea of the value that God sets on one single human life. And we must act. We must speak up and speak out. I believe each one of us is called to be an Abraham, the possessor of a lone, particularly and deeply human voice. We have the power to speak, to penetrate the shadows of the fog that is over us. If Abraham was bold enough to bargain with God about the life of people, we too can learn from God and be bold enough to include in our prayer life all of humanity. But we can't just say prayers and be done with it. We must be willing to gently but honestly confront our neighbors, our friends, our co-workers, and yes, even our families when they spew out hate and distrust. Our lives begin to end the day that we are silent about things that are important to God. So why do we remain silent? Will you pray with me, please? May the Spirit of our God, made known to us, touch each one of you here today. We give thanks for this wonderful country that we live in. God, we need you to raise up leaders who act with justice, love, mercy, and grace. And we need to model that in our lives and in the lives of those around us. We need to teach that to the next generation. We ask, oh God, that you go before us to show us the way. That you will go above us to watch over us. And God, I mostly ask that you will push us into places that we may not necessarily want to go, as you call us to action. May we trust, O God, that you are beside us as a strong and constant companion. Remind us that we are not alone, and that we are each loved beyond our wildest imagination. And may the fire, God, of your blessings burn brightly upon each one of us, now and always. Amen. Amen. God bless you.